space. His condition is unstable.
I just want to see him just 1 second.
The doctors had already stopped trying. The clipboard hit the table at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in November. Dr. Reeves pulled off his gloves slowly, the way doctors do when they've accepted something the family hasn't yet. He turned to face the woman in the hallway, small, trembling, still wearing her supermarket uniform because she hadn't had time to change, and he said the words that no mother should ever hear. "Mrs. Adaeze Coleman, I'm so sorry. There is nothing more we can do." And that was the moment Adaeze Coleman should have collapsed. But she didn't. Not yet. 6 months earlier, Adaeze had been the kind of woman who made everything look effortless. Single mother. Night shift cashier at Foodmax on Clement Street. Sunday choir director at Calvary Gospel Church. She raised her 17-year-old son Marcus, with nothing but a worn Bible, a 2-bedroom apartment with a leaking ceiling, and a faith that her own mother had stitched into her like bones. Marcus was the kind of boy that made a struggling neighborhood believe in itself. Full scholarship to study engineering. Captain of the debate team. The boy could quote Langston Hughes and Romans 8 in the same breath and make both sound like they were written for that exact moment. He was everything. But somewhere between his junior and senior year, something started pulling Marcus into a current Adaeze couldn't see. Started with a name. Dre. Dre was 19. Dre had money that didn't come from work. Dre drove a car that didn't come from savings. And Dre had a way of making boys like Marcus feel like their scholarships and their Bibles were reasons to be embarrassed, not celebrated. Adaeze noticed the changes the way you notice a slow leak. First just a dampness, then a stain, then one morning the whole ceiling is coming down. Marcus stopped coming to choir rehearsal. Marcus started coming home at 3 a.m. smelling like places she couldn't name. Then came the phone call she'd been dreading without knowing she was dreading it. "Ma'am, this is Officer Daniels from the 14th Precinct. Your son Marcus Coleman has been taken into custody in connection with an armed robbery on Fletcher Avenue. 3 people are in the hospital. One of them is critical." The phone hit the floor before he finished the sentence. Marcus maintained from his jail cell that he hadn't known what Dre was planning, that he'd been in the car, that he hadn't gone inside, that he hadn't touched anyone. But the prosecutor had a witness. And the witness said otherwise. The public defender, overwhelmed, underfunded, carrying 42 cases, told Adaeze quietly in a corridor that Marcus was looking at 15 to 25 years. 15 years. Marcus was 17. Adaeze did the math that no mother should have to do. He would be in his 30s before he breathed free air again. His scholarship would be gone. His engineering degree would be a ghost. His entire future, the one she'd prayed over, fasted over, cried over, would be dismantled by a single night with the wrong person in the wrong car on the wrong street. She sold the extra furniture to pay for an attorney she found online. He took her money, $4,000 she'd saved over 3 years, and showed up to the first hearing unprepared, mispronouncing Marcus's name twice. Then came the diagnosis. 3 weeks before the trial, Adaeze collapsed at work between registers 7 and 8. She woke up in the hospital to a doctor explaining that the mass they found in her chest had been growing quietly for over a year. Stage 3. Aggressive. 1 son in jail. 1 body betraying her. $4,000 gone. No savings left. Rent overdue. The enemy had been systematic. Her pastor, Brother Emmanuel, came to visit her in the hospital. He sat beside her bed, opened his Bible to Psalm 88, and read her the darkest psalm in all of Scripture, the one where the writer never actually gets an answer, where the chapter ends in darkness with no resolution. He looked at her and said, "Adaeze, sometimes God lets us go to the bottom of the bottom, because that's where he does his greatest work. The Red Sea didn't part until Israel had their backs to the water." She stared at the ceiling. She believed him with her head. But her heart had gone somewhere cold and quiet. The night of November 14th, Marcus was transferred to the county medical facility because he'd developed a severe infection from an untreated wound he'd received during his arrest, a deep gash on his side that the holding facility had bandaged carelessly and forgotten. By the time they transferred him, The infection had spread aggressively through his bloodstream. Sepsis. In a 17-year-old boy. Adaeze arrived at the hospital still in her supermarket uniform because Brother Emmanuel's wife had called her in the middle of her shift. She walked through those sliding doors, and the antiseptic smell hit her like a wall, and she ran to the desk and said her son's name like it was the only word she knew. They took her to a room. Marcus was unconscious. His face, her face, his father's forehead, was gray in a way that faces shouldn't be gray. Tubes and wires crisscrossed his body like a terrible map of everything that had gone wrong. The machines beside him beeped in rhythms that sounded increasingly desperate. The doctor worked for 2 hours. At 11:47 p.m. he stopped. He pulled off his gloves. He turned to the hallway where Adaeze stood. "Mrs. Coleman, I'm so sorry. There is nothing more we can do. This is the moment. Not the moment of the miracle. The moment before the miracle. The most important moment in every story God ever wrote." Adaeze Coleman stood in that hospital hallway in her Foodmax uniform with a mass growing in her chest and $4,000 gone, and a public defender who'd quit last week and her son lying gray behind that door. And she did something that made the nurse at the station look up from her computer. She laughed. Not the laugh of someone who had lost their mind. The laugh of someone who had found something. She laughed the way you laugh when you've been reading a mystery novel and you suddenly realize you know exactly how it ends. She walked back into that room. She pulled the plastic chair as close to Marcus's bed as it would go. She took his hand, the one without the 4, the one that still had the small scar from when he was 8 and tried to build a go-kart from scratch, and she held it between both of hers. And she started to pray. Not the formal, structured prayer of a Sunday choir director. The other prayer. The one that sounds like a woman refusing to let go. The prayer that bypasses vocabulary and goes straight to groaning. The prayer Paul talked about in Romans 8. The intercession of the Spirit with groanings too deep for words. She didn't ask God to think about it. She didn't ask God if he was able. She reminded him. "You told me before he was formed in my womb you knew him. You told me the plans you have for him are plans for a future and a hope. You told me he was mine on loan from you, which means he was yours first, and I need you to come get what belongs to you right now. I am not leaving this room. I am not releasing this hand. And I am not accepting that report, because you are not finished." Finished. The nurse at the station would later tell the story at her own church 200 miles away. She said the room got quiet in a way rooms don't normally get quiet. She said the machines kept beeping. And then, at 12:03 a.m. on November 15th, one of them beeped differently. Dr. Reeves was still in the building, writing his notes, when the charge nurse burst into the break room. "Doctor, you need to come back." He came back. Marcus Coleman's oxygen saturation, which had been at 61%, a number that in medical literature has a specific, grim meaning, was climbing. Not slowly. Climbing. Dr. Reeves stood at the foot of the bed and watched the number pass 70. Then 75. Then 82. He looked at the attending nurse. She looked at him. Neither of them said the word they were both thinking. By 1:15 a.m., Marcus Coleman opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was his mother's face. Still in her supermarket uniform. Tears streaming down without sound. The first thing he said, his voice thin as paper but clear, was, "Mama, I saw something." In the weeks following, Marcus described it the same way every single time. And if you know anything about people who've had genuine experiences, you know that the consistency is the tell. Because liars embellish, but witnesses simply repeat. He said he was in a place of complete darkness. Not frightening darkness. Absolute darkness. The kind of dark that has weight. And then a light. But not a light from a source, a light that was the source. A light that he said felt more like a voice that he heard with his skin. And the voice said 4 words. "Not yet. Go back." He woke up. 3 weeks after Marcus's recovery, which Dr. Reeves would document in a medical journal using the word unexplained 17 times, something happened with the trial. The prosecution's key witness recanted. The man, a 23-year-old named Trevor, walked into his own attorney's office and said he'd lied. That Dre had pressured him. That Marcus had genuinely stayed in the car. That he'd been in the store, and Marcus hadn't been. When asked what made him come forward, Trevor sat quietly for a moment. Then he said, "I heard the boy almost died in the hospital. And I thought, if he dies for something I helped put on him, that's on me forever. I can't carry that." Charges against Marcus Coleman were significantly reduced. He served 8 months in a juvenile rehabilitation facility. Not 15 years. Months. He got out at 18. And then, in a turn that even Adeeze's pastor said he needed time to process, the engineering department at the university that had rescinded his scholarship, upon hearing the full account of his case, voted internally to reinstate it with a 1-year deferral. He enrolled the following fall. And Adaeze. The oncologist called 3 months after Marcus's discharge with results from her most recent scan. She wrote about it later in a letter she shared with her church, and this is the line everyone remembered. He said the mass had reduced significantly and the markers were trending in a direction he described as encouraging. He used that word 3 times. I asked him if he had an explanation. He paused for a very long time and he said, "Mrs. Coleman, in 20 years of practice, I've learned to recognize when something is operating outside of my expertise." I said, "Doctor, I know exactly whose expertise it is." And I hung up and I cried for 45 minutes straight. Music begins to swell softly underneath. Here is what this story does not say. It does not say that faith is a formula. It does not say that if you pray hard enough, every sick person recovers. It does not say that every wrongly accused person goes free. It does not package God into a neat prosperity gospel bow and hand him to you like a vending machine. What this story does say is this. There was a woman in a hallway in a supermarket uniform at midnight with nothing left. No money. No attorney. No doctor. No hope by any earthly measurement. And she chose to pick up the one thing that could not be taken, sold, stolen, or infected. Her faith. She held her son's hand and she held God to his word. And the God who stopped the mouths of lions, who walked in the fire with 3 Hebrew boys, who called Lazarus out of 4 days of death, that same God turned his attention to a hospital room in an ordinary city on an ordinary Tuesday night. And he said, "Not yet. Maybe you're reading this in your own hallway. Maybe your ceiling is coming down and you can hear the machines beeping and everyone has pulled off their gloves and turned to face you with that look. Hold on. Not because circumstances will always reverse by morning, but because the God of the reversal is still in the room, still at work in the darkness, still writing the last chapter of a story you think is already over. You haven't seen the end yet, and neither has the enemy. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Jeremiah 29 verse 11. Glory to God alone.